As soon as I stepped off the plane, I saw my husband's car parked at the airport. I thought he had come to pick me up, so to surprise him, I quietly slipped into the back seat and hid. But then he got into the car with someone else. I was in shock. When I heard their conversation, I felt my heart stop. They were hatching a plan. Before we begin, please leave a comment telling us which region you're listening from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more fascinating stories. The soft rumble of my carry-on wheels echoed against the tiled floor of the domestic terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Zariah took a deep breath, letting the characteristic scent of the airport, a mix of coffee, air conditioning, and thousands of travel stories, fill her lungs. She had been out of town for a whole week, a marathon of meetings in New York, client presentations, and site visits had completely drained her energy. She adjusted the oversized hoodie she had chosen specifically for flight comfort, feeling an ache spreading across her back and neck. In that moment, the only thing she wanted was her house, a hot shower, and, of course, her husband, Omari. A faint smile appeared on her slightly dry lips. Omari had promised to pick her up. The last text she had sent him before taking off was, "Drive safe, bae. Can't wait to see you." Omari had replied with a heart emoji and a promise that he would be waiting in the parking lot. Zariah pushed her small suitcase and picked up the pace toward the arrivals area. Outside, the Atlanta sky had already begun to darken. Shifting from an orange hue to a deep purple, the streetlights were starting to flicker on, creating that cityscape she missed so much every time she traveled. And there it was. Beyond the automatic glass doors, her eyes immediately found his metallic black SUV, impeccably parked not far from the curb. Her heart filled with warmth instantly. Omari had kept his promise. Zariah smiled widely. She felt as if half her fatigue had vanished. She pushed her suitcase across the sidewalk. However, as she got closer, she didn't see Omari inside the car. The driver's seat was empty. Maybe he went to the restroom or to grab a drink, she thought. Zariah stopped for a moment next to the SUV. She looked around. The pickup zone was pretty busy, but there was no sign of Omari. Suddenly, a mischievous idea crossed her mind. What if she surprised Omari? She pulled the handle of the rear door. It wasn't locked. Omari had a careless habit of forgetting to lock the car when he stepped away for a moment. Zariah's smile grew even wider. It was the perfect opportunity. She opened the door as carefully as possible to avoid making noise. With a quick movement, she tucked her carry-on onto the floorboard and slid inside. His car was spacious, with a third row of seats. It was a luxury family SUV they had bought last year, Omari's dream car. Zariah moved quickly toward the very back, into the third row. It was a bit cramped and dusty, a clear sign they barely used it. She crouched in the gap between the second and third rows. The posture was uncomfortable, but she stifled a small laugh. She imagined how surprised Omari would be when she suddenly popped up from the back. Zariah waited a minute, then two. The familiar scent of the car air freshener he had put in last week mixed faintly with Omari's signature cologne lingering on the seats. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from anticipation. In the distance, she could hear the roar of jet engines and announcements echoing faintly from inside the terminal. 3 minutes later, she heard the familiar click of the key fob. The driver's door opened. Zariah held her breath. Her smile was ready to bloom. Omari got in. His freshly applied scent, a fragrance of oatmeal and tobacco she knew well, filled the car instantly, just as Zariah was about to yell, "Surprise!" She heard the passenger door open too. Her smile froze in her throat. Her body went rigid. She thought it might be a colleague of Omari's who happened to be with him, but the person who climbed into the car was someone she knew all too well. It was her own sister, Kezia. Zariah froze. Her brain struggled to process the information. What was Kezia doing here? Wasn't she supposed to be in London managing her furniture export business? When had she come back? Why hadn't she said anything? And why was she with Omari? Thousands of questions bombarded Zariah's mind in a split second. She remained silent, crouched in her hiding spot. The playful joy from a moment ago had transformed into a suffocating confusion. Omari started the engine, and the air conditioning hissed to life. The car began to slowly pull out of the parking lot. "Are you sure Zariah won't suspect anything? It's been a week." Keziah's cold voice broke the silence. It was her sister's voice, but it sounded so strange, completely calculating. Zariah's heart stopped. Omari let out a stifled laugh. That laugh, which usually warmed Zariah's heart, now sounded like a dagger plunging into her back. "Don't worry, Keziah. She's too dumb," Omari said. The blood in Zariah's veins seemed to freeze. Dumb. Omari thought she was dumb. "She's too busy with her work and trusts me too much," Omari continued with a relaxed tone, as if he were talking about the weather. "She thinks our father only left us this house and a few savings. She has no idea about the real will we have." The real will. Dad? What were they talking about? Zariah held her breath until her chest hurt. Keziah huffed. "You better be right. I don't want my life's work ruined by your carelessness. The day after tomorrow, remember that. The day after tomorrow is the deadline. The lawyer has everything set up. We withdraw all the assets from that safety deposit box on the exact day marking 6 months since Dad's death. Everything." "Of course," Omari replied. "And once we withdraw everything, we can get rid of her." Zariah's body shook violently. Get rid of her. Get rid of her. Her husband, the man she loved most in the world, and her own sister, her blood, were planning something far more horrible than simple infidelity. They were conspiring to steal her father's inheritance, an inheritance Zariah didn't even know existed, and they planned to eliminate her. Zariah covered her mouth with both hands to stifle a scream that threatened to escape. The air in the third row seemed to thin. She couldn't breathe. Her vision began to blur. This can't be. It must be a nightmare. Surely she was still asleep on the plane. "What if she finds out I'm back in the States?" Keziah asked again. "She won't. I've taken care of everything. You came in through the VIP lounge. No one saw you. We've moved fast during the week she's been busy in New York. It's perfect," Omari answered. The car continued its way down the airport highway. Zariah closed her eyes. Her body was rigid as stone. She was no longer the Zariah excited to give a surprise. She was a witness to a murder plot against herself, orchestrated by her husband and her own sister. The drive from the airport to their home in Buckhead usually took 40 minutes, but that time felt like an eternity to Zariah. She remained curled up in the third row. The muscles in her entire body screamed with cramps, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in her heart. She listened to every detail of their plan. They spoke of a private safety deposit box at a bank downtown, of forged documents that were already prepared, and how Omari would dispose of Zariah once everything was over. Their plan was to make it look like an accident. Zariah bit her lower lip until it bled, as if trying to release the fear and rage. She had to get out of that car. She had to survive. But how? Suddenly the car slowed down and turned. Zariah peeked through the gap between the seats. They weren't on the way home. They were pulling into an area with upscale coffee shops off the main road. "I need a coffee to celebrate," Keziah said. "Don't take too long," Omari replied. "I have to get home right away." I told her I was picking her up and that traffic was bad. If I arrive too late, she'll get suspicious. "Just 10 minutes. I just want to make sure we're on the same page for the plan the day after tomorrow," Keziah said. The car engine turned off. Zariah heard the click of seatbelts unbuckling. The car doors opened and closed. She heard their footsteps fading away on the asphalt. It was her chance. Zariah waited 30 seconds, which felt like 30 years. She had to make sure they had entered the coffee shop. She moved carefully. Her legs were cramping. She grabbed the handle of the door beside her and opened it as quietly as possible. The small click sounded like an explosion in her ears. She froze. There was no reaction. She was safe. She got out quickly, pulled her carry-on from the floorboard, and closed the door again without making a sound. Her heart was beating wildly, as if it were going to burst out of her chest. Without looking back, she walked away from that car at a brisk pace. She turned the first corner and hid behind a dark strip mall. Her hands shook violently as she pulled her phone from her purse. She had to get out of there. She opened the Uber app. Her location was detected. She requested a ride to her home address. She had to get home before Omari. She had to start acting. She couldn't run. If she ran, they would know she had heard everything, and they would hunt her down that very night. No, she had to return to that nest of vipers. She had to act as if she knew nothing. 5 minutes later, the Uber she had ordered arrived. The driver helped her put the suitcase in the trunk. "Just getting back home, huh?" the driver asked kindly. Zaraya just nodded. She couldn't find her voice. Throughout the ride, Zaraya stared out the window without seeing anything. The bright city lights seemed to mock her. Her husband Omari, the man she had married 3 years ago, the man who had always been sweet, who had always supported her career, the man who had sent her an "I love you" text that very morning. It was all fake, a lie, and Kezia, her sister. Zaraya had never been close to Kezia. Her sister had always been ambitious, cold, and materialistic, especially after their mother died. But Zaraya could never have imagined that Kezia was this evil. Finally, tears welled up and soaked her hoodie, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. Dad. They were taking advantage of her father's kindness. Zaraya swore internally. She wouldn't let them win. She would take back what was hers. She would make them pay for this betrayal. The Uber arrived at her house. The gate was still closed. Omari hadn't returned yet. Good. Zaraya paid the driver. Her voice cracked as she thanked him. She opened the gate, dragged her suitcase inside, and unlocked the front door. The house was cold and empty. Their wedding photo hanging in the living room, the image of Zaraya smiling happily in her white wedding dress, embraced by Omari, felt like a slap in the face. She went straight to the bathroom. She needed to wash up. She needed to erase any trace of fear from her face. She took a hot shower, washing away the cold sweat and tears. She scrubbed her skin hard, as if trying to scrub off the terror that had clung to her body. After the shower, she put on comfortable loungewear and dabbed on a little perfume. She had to look normal. She had to look like a tired wife who just got back from a business trip. She went down to the kitchen, made herself some hot tea, and sat at the table. She waited. At 9 o'clock at night, she heard the sound of the gate opening, followed by the sound of Omari's car pulling into the garage. Her heart started beating again, but this time filled with steely determination. The game had begun. The front door opened. "Bae, you here already?" Omari's voice sounded clearly surprised. Zaraya walked out of the kitchen. "Yeah, honey, I'm in the kitchen." Omari appeared, slightly breathless. His face was full of feigned surprise. "Babe, oh my God, I'm so sorry. The highway was a nightmare earlier, and then something came up with a client. I was just heading out to pick you up, and—" Zaraya smiled, the most genuine smile she could force. "It's okay, babe. I know you're busy. I got tired of waiting and just grabbed an Uber." Omari walked over and hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry, babe. I really am sorry." Zaraya returned the hug. Her body tensed, feeling the embrace of the man who, an hour earlier, was planning her elimination. His shirt smelled of coffee and faintly of a woman's perfume she recognized as Kezia's. "I missed you so much," Omari whispered in her ear. Zaraya fought back nausea. She slowly pulled away from the hug, looked into Omari's eyes, searching for the lie, and found it. "I missed you too, honey," Zaraya said softly, and then she cast the bait. "Oh, by the way, I thought I saw Kezia at the airport earlier. It looked just like her. Is she back in the States?" Zaraya saw it clearly, the sheer panic that crossed Omari's eyes. His pupils dilated. But Omari was an excellent actor. He let out a little laugh, though it sounded a bit tense. "Kezia, you must be mistaken, babe. She's in London. You must be tired and saw someone who looked like her," Omari said, stroking Zaraya's cheek. Zaraya smiled. I guess so, yeah. I was probably just really tired. I'm going up to the room to rest. Sure, get some rest. I'll make you some hot tea, Omari offered. I already made some, Zariah replied as she headed for the stairs. Behind her, she felt Omari's gaze still on her, a gaze trying to determine if the bait she had just cast was a simple coincidence or the beginning of suspicion. Zariah kept walking. Now she knew. Omari was lying. Kezia was here, and they thought she was dumb. Inside the bedroom, Zariah locked the door. She leaned against it. She was short of breath. Act 1 was over. Now she had to find out what that real will was, where that safety deposit box was, and how to stop them before the day after tomorrow arrived. Zariah lay in bed with her back to Omari. She listened to her husband's deep, regular breathing. The man was already fast asleep, probably exhausted after a long day of work and celebrating his evil plan with Keziah. Zariah, on the other hand, was wide awake. Her eyes were wide open in the darkness of the bedroom. Every second felt like a needle pricking her skin. She had to wait. She had to make sure Omari was completely asleep. She closed her eyes, regulated her breathing, and pretended to sleep. About 30 minutes later, Omari moved in his sleep. His hand wrapped around Zariah's waist and pulled her body close to his. "Missed you," Omari mumbled in his sleep. Zariah held her breath. That gesture, which had once always given her a sense of safety, now felt like the touch of a venomous snake. She wanted to scream, push him away, and run, but she endured it all. She let her husband hold her amidst his lies. This was the first torture she had to endure. She waited a full hour, listening to the silence of the house that now felt threatening to her. When the wall clock struck 2 a.m. with 2 chimes, Zariah knew it was time. With almost imperceptible slowness, Zariah removed Omari's arm from her waist. She moved toward the edge of the bed. The slightest creak of the mattress sounded like thunder in her ears. Omari didn't move. Zariah put her feet on the cold floor. She stood there for a few seconds, listening. Only Omari's regular breathing could be heard. She had done it. Zariah left the room without making a sound. She didn't turn on any lights. The moonlight streaming through the large living room window was enough to find her way. Her target was, of course, Omari's home office. That room was on the ground floor, next to the small library her father had left behind. Until now, Omari had treated that room as his personal domain. Zariah, respecting her husband's work and privacy, had barely ever entered it. How stupid she had been. She opened the office door. The hinges creaked quietly. Zariah froze. She listened again. No footsteps were heard upstairs. She went in and closed the door behind her. Here, she turned on a small lamp that only illuminated the desk. The room was tidy, too tidy. Books were lined up on the shelves, papers organized in folders. She began to search. She opened the desk drawers one by one. Inside was just normal office supplies, bills, and some documents from Omari's projects that Zariah didn't understand. Nothing suspicious. No will. Zariah began to despair. Where could he have hidden it? She looked around the room. Her eyes stopped on a landscape painting hanging on the wall. The painting was slightly crooked. Zariah walked over. She remembered Omari had bought that painting a month after her father died to change the vibe, as he said. Zariah pushed the painting to the side. Behind it, embedded in the wall, was a small gray safe. Zariah's heart pounded. This was it. She remembered Omari saying once that he had lost the key to the safe, and that inside were just old, unimportant papers. Lies. The safe operated with a digital code. Zariah looked at the keypad. The code. What code would Omari use? The man who thought she was dumb. Surely he would use something easy to guess, something sentimental but fake. Zariah tried their wedding anniversary. Fail. A red light blinked. She tried her birthday. Fail. Omari's birthday. Fail. Zariah thought intensely. What was important to Omari, or to them? To Kezia? Suddenly, a chilling idea hit her. Kezia's birthday. Zariah didn't remember it exactly, but she had a vague idea of the month. She searched her memory. October 16th. She punched in the numbers 1610. Click. The soft sound of the lock opening. The safe popped open. Zariah's breath hitched. Her heart shattered. Her husband's safe password was her sister's birthday. That's how deep their relationship went. She pushed that thought away. Focus. She had to concentrate. She pulled the safe door open. Inside, it was empty. Completely empty. There were no stacks of cash, no documents, no wills, just a thin layer of dust on the bottom. Zariah slumped to the floor. Her legs gave out. It was a trap, or they had already moved it. All her effort had been in vain. She had failed. The day after tomorrow. There was no time left. Tears of frustration began to well up in her eyes. She felt around the inside of the dark safe, hoping to find something they had left behind. And then her fingers touched something. A small piece of paper, folded thinly, was stuck in the hinge slot inside. It had probably fallen and been forgotten. Zariah pulled it out and brought it under the lamplight. It wasn't a will. It was a receipt. A receipt from Premier Private Vaults, a high-end safety deposit service in downtown Atlanta. The receipt was for the rental of a private safety deposit box. Lessee name, Kezia. Rental date, April 10th, 3 days after her father's death. Zariah understood instantly. This was it. This was the safety deposit box they were talking about in the car. It wasn't the small safe at home. The real will and all the assets they were after would undoubtedly be there, and they planned to withdraw them. The day after tomorrow, they would empty that box. Zariah quickly folded the paper again. She couldn't take it. She had to put it back where it was. She had to make them believe their plan was safe. She tucked the paper back into the hinge slot where she had found it. She closed the safe door and spun it until it locked. She put the painting back in place, making sure it was perfectly straight. She turned off the lamp and crept back to her bedroom. Omari was still in the same position. Zariah slipped back into bed. She turned her back to her husband again. Her body was still trembling, but not from fear. This time it was from a burning rage. She knew the location. She knew when they would act. Now she couldn't do this alone. She had only tomorrow to come up with a plan. She needed help. She needed someone her father trusted. She needed Mr. Sterling, his lawyer. Morning came too soon. Zariah had barely slept. By 5 a.m, she was already awake with a mind full of complex thoughts. Today, she had to act normally. She had to play the role of the tired wife, happy to be home. When Omari woke up, Zariah was already in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the air. "Good morning, babe," Omari greeted, hugging her from behind and kissing her temple. "Look at my hard-working wife. You should be resting." Zariah forced a smile. "It's okay, honey. I missed cooking for you." She turned, wrapped her arms around Omari's neck, and looked into his eyes. "Truth is, I am exhausted. I think I'm going to spend today at a spa, get pampered from head to toe. Is that okay?" Omari's face lit up. It was the reaction Zariah expected. Of course he would agree. A wife busy with self-care is a wife who isn't suspicious. A dumb wife who only cares about her appearance. "Of course, babe. Use my credit card. You deserve it," he said. Zariah smiled sweetly. "Thanks, honey." After breakfast, Omari left for work. Zariah knew he would surely meet up with Kezia to finalize their plan. As soon as Omari's car disappeared around the corner, Zariah's mask fell instantly. Her face hardened. She grabbed her purse and car keys and left immediately. But she didn't go to any spa. Her first stop was a small electronics store down the street. She bought a burner phone and a prepaid SIM card. She wasn't going to use her own phone. Omari might be smart enough to track her. From there, she drove to a quiet, old-school coffee shop in Virginia Highland, far from her house or office. She ordered a chamomile tea and sat at the most secluded table. Her hands shook slightly as she dialed a number she knew by heart. The number of her father's trusted lawyer, Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling was a kind, elderly man, almost part of the family. He had retired suddenly a month after her father's death and moved to the countryside near Savannah. At the time, Zariah thought he really wanted to rest. Now she knew he must have been forced into retirement by Kezia and Omari. The phone rang 3 times before a raspy, aged voice answered. "Hello, Sterling speaking." Zariah's voice trembled. There was a moment of silence on the other end. "Hello? Who is this?" "It's Zariah." "Yes, counselor. It's me, Zariah." "How are you, Zariah, my child?" "Well, here I am. To what do I owe the honor of your call? I thought you had forgotten about this old glory." Mr. Sterling's voice sounded sad and a bit wary. Surely Omari and Kezia had discredited him to her. "I would never forget you, Mr. Sterling. In fact, I'm calling because I need your help. It's very urgent. It's about my father. About his will." Zariah went straight to the point. A deep sigh was heard. "I knew this day would come. What have they done to you?" Zariah's heart felt relieved. Mr. Sterling knew. He was on her side. "You knew? About Kezia and Omari?" "I didn't know to what extent, but your sister Kezia, that girl is greedy. And your husband Omari, I'm sorry, child, but he is a weak man," Mr. Sterling said. Zariah told him everything, without stopping, without hiding anything. The car at the airport, their conversation, the real will, the plan for the day after tomorrow, the empty safe at home, and the receipt for the private safety deposit box in Kezia's name. Mr. Sterling listened patiently. When Zariah finished speaking, there was silence. "Counselor, are you still there?" "My God, Zariah," Mr. Sterling's voice trembled, a mix of anger and compassion. "They are more evil than I imagined, trying to steal the inheritance and eliminate you. This is going too far." "So is it true? Is there a real will, counselor?" Zariah asked. "That is correct," confirmed Mr. Sterling. "Your father was a very wise man. He foresaw all of this. He knew Kezia's nature and had his doubts about Omari. That's why your father made 2 wills. Zariah held her breath. "The will that was read after his death, which split the inheritance equally between you and Kezia, is the second will. Your father made it to appease Kezia. He hoped she would be satisfied with her share. And the real will, the first will, I have been guarding it. Your father handed it to me personally. That will stipulates that all major company assets, all real estate properties, and all significant investments of your father are bequeathed to you, Zariah. Kezia only receives a fixed amount of cash, a considerable amount, but nothing compared to the company assets." "Why? Why wasn't that real will read?" "Because there was a condition." Mr. Sterling's voice turned grave. "A very important condition. The real will would have full legal validity if read exactly 6 months after your father's death, and only if opened in my presence as the legal executor designated by him." Zariah did a quick calculation. 6 months, counselor. The day after tomorrow marks 6 months. "I know," said Mr. Sterling, "and Kezia and Omari must know it too. Somehow they got a copy of the real will from my office. That's why they forced me to retire. They stole the copy, but they couldn't steal the original. I kept it in a very safe place. So what is in that bank safety deposit box must be the copy of the real will. And most importantly, the original documents of your father's assets. Property deeds, company stock certificates. Their plan is to use forged documents to transfer everything to their name before the real will is legally read." Zariah closed her eyes. It all fit. They were in a race against time. "Counselor, we don't have time," Zariah said firmly. "The day after tomorrow, they will empty the safe. We have to stop them." "But how, Zariah? The box is in Kezia's name. They have the key. We can't just open it." Mr. Sterling's voice sounded worried. Zariah stayed silent for a moment, thinking of a plan. Kezia and Omari were greedy and nervous about the deadline. "We don't need to open it ourselves, counselor." Zariah's voice was now cold and calculating. "We will make them come. We will use their greed as bait for a trap. Can you return to Atlanta today?" There was a moment of silence. "For your father and for you, I'll catch the first train." "Good. I have a plan, counselor. A plan for tomorrow. That afternoon, Mr. Sterling arrived at Peachtree Station. Zariah, to avoid being tracked, had parked her car at a nearby shopping center and took an Uber to pick him up. The old man looked much more tired and gray than the last time she saw him. At her father's funeral, there was a deep sadness in his eyes. As soon as Mr. Sterling saw Zariah, he hugged her tightly, like a father hugging a lost daughter. "Are you okay, Zariah? Did they hurt you?" he asked with a trembling voice. Zariah shook her head. "I'm fine, counselor, but we don't have much time." They went to a small, secure hotel where Mr. Sterling would stay. Inside the modest hotel room, Mr. Sterling opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick leather envelope. It contained a sealed document wrapped in velvet cloth. "This," said Mr. Sterling, "is your father's real will. I have protected it with my life." Zariah looked at the seal. This document was the center of all the betrayal. "Their plan is for the day after tomorrow, counselor," Zariah said, her voice steady. "They plan to empty the box at Premier Private Vaults. They'll think I don't know anything, but we can't wait for the day after tomorrow. We have to make them move tomorrow." Mr. Sterling nodded. "I understand. We have to make them rush. If they panic, they'll make mistakes." "That is my plan, counselor," Zariah said. "I will give them a reason to panic." Zariah explained her idea. She would pretend to have found a letter left by her father, a letter that would raise suspicions, specifically mentioning the name of the bank and an order for her to check it. Kezia and Omari, with the deadline breathing down their necks, wouldn't risk Zariah going to that bank alone. They would panic and decide to accompany her tomorrow with the intention of securing the assets and simultaneously eliminating her. This would push their plan from the day after tomorrow to tomorrow. "It's risky, Zariah," Mr. Sterling said with concern. "You are putting yourself in a room with them alone." "I know," Zariah replied. Her eyes stared fixedly at the lawyer. "But it's the only way. I can't let them get away with it. You prepare everything from the outside. As soon as we enter the bank tomorrow, everything must be ready." Mr. Sterling saw the determination in Zariah's eyes. She was no longer the naive Zariah he knew. She was her father's daughter, a warrior. "All right," said Mr. Sterling. "I will contact an old friend in the police force and the branch manager of the bank. We will set the trap. You just focus on getting them there." Zariah returned home that night. Omari was already waiting for her, feigning concern over her lateness at the spa. Zariah acted perfectly. She complained about how exhausting it had been to be pampered and then sat on the sofa next to Omari. It was time. "Honey," Zariah said softly. "Yes, my love?" "I was organizing some of Dad's things that were still in storage, and I found something strange." She made her voice sound doubtful. Omari tensed instantly. "Strange? What thing?" "I found an old diary of Dad's, and inside was a small letter for me. But the letter is weird," Zariah continued. "What letter?" Omari asked, his voice slightly higher, clearly panicked, but trying to feign curiosity. "Dad wrote that if anything happened to him, I should go to Premier Private Vaults in the financial district, that there was something I had to see there, something very important. He says he rented a safety deposit box there. I don't understand what it's about, babe. What safety deposit box? Why did Dad never tell us anything?" Zariah looked at Omari with eyes of feigned innocence. Omari's face went pale as a corpse. He tried to smile, but only managed a rigid grimace. "A box at Premier Private Vaults? Oh, it's probably an old letter, babe. Don't worry about it." "But the handwriting is recent," Zariah insisted. "I know Dad's handwriting. I want to go tomorrow at noon. I'm curious to know what's inside." "No!" Omari shouted too quickly. He realized his mistake and corrected immediately. "I mean, don't go alone, babe. Those places have complicated procedures. They don't let just anyone in. Actually, what a coincidence." "Coincidence, babe?" "Kezia, she's actually in Atlanta. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I wanted it to be a surprise," Omari lied quickly. Turns out she also has to go to that same bank tomorrow. Why don't you go together? Kezia will help you manage everything. She's better at these things. Zariah feigned surprise. Kezia is in Atlanta? Why didn't you tell me? Well, great. I'll call her. No need. I'll call her, Omari interrupted quickly. She's busy. I'll set up the appointment tomorrow at 11 a.m. We'll meet in the bank lobby. How does that sound? Yeah, that's fine, Zariah said docilely. Omari stood up immediately. I'm going to the bathroom for a sec. He walked quickly toward his office and closed the door. Zariah knew exactly what her husband was doing. Omari was calling Kezia right now, informing her of this emergency. Their plan had gone sideways. Dumb Zariah had suddenly found a clue. They had no other choice. They had to act tomorrow. Zariah stood alone in the living room. Her heart was pounding. The bait had been taken. Tomorrow was doomsday. She looked at their wedding photo again. The happy smile in the photo now seemed like a cruel joke. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow, all of this would end. The next morning, the atmosphere in the car was extremely tense. Zariah sat in the passenger seat next to Omari. Kezia sat alone in the back seat. It was the first time Zariah had seen her sister in person since the airport incident. Kezia looked as cold and elegant as ever, dressed in an expensive black blazer, but her eyes were sharp, and there was no warmth in her greeting to Zariah in the hallway of her house. She just nodded briefly, as if this meeting were a nuisance. Omari drove nervously. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He kept glancing sideways at Zariah, trying to force a smile. You okay, babe? You seem tense, he said. I'm just nervous, Zariah replied quietly. I don't know what we're going to find. This is all very strange. Everything will be fine, said Omari. That's right, Zariah. Kezia's voice came from the back seat, cold and cutting. Your big sister will handle everything. You just have to follow us. Zariah knew what Kezia meant by handle. They arrived at Premier Private Vaults, an opulent office building in the heart of the financial district. The safety deposit box area was in the third basement. Security was so high that Zariah felt like she was entering a fortress. They had to pass through 2 steel doors, biometric identification, and a metal detector. Mr. Sterling must have arranged all of this. Kezia walked in front. As the lessee, she led the way. She seemed very familiar with the place. An employee in an impeccable uniform guided them to a private room. The room wasn't large. It was soundproof, windowless, and had only a thick steel door. Inside, there was just a table and 3 chairs. Wait here, please. We will bring the box in a moment, the employee said. The steel door closed behind them with a soft hydraulic hiss, followed by the loud click of a magnetic lock. Zariah, Omari, and Kezia were now alone in this sterile room. Omari seemed restless, constantly adjusting his shirt collar. Kezia, on the other hand, sat calmly, staring fixedly at Zariah. So you found a letter from Dad? Kezia asked. Her tone was dismissive. Yes, sister, Zariah replied. Well, at least your curiosity served a purpose. You've moved everything up, Kezia said. Zariah pretended not to understand. Moved what up, sister? Before Kezia could answer, a small panel on the wall opened. An employee on the other side slid a large metal box, the safety deposit box, into the room, and the panel closed again. Kezia stood up. She pulled a key from her purse, inserted the key, and typed a PIN code. A double click was heard. She lifted the lid of the metal box. Zariah held her breath. She expected it, but still. Inside was a neat stack of valuable documents. Property deeds, a bundle of stock certificates from her father's company, several velvet bags containing investment diamonds, and on top of it all, a thick, neatly bound document, the copy of the real will they had stolen. This is it, Kezia said. She pulled the documents out and put them on the table. All of this was Dad's, and now it is all mine. What are you talking about, sister? Zariah asked, feigning a tremble in her voice. Dad's will. The will you know is fake, Kezia shouted, finally losing patience. "Our stupid father gave everything to you, his naive, spoiled daughter. Me, who worked hard to build this business with him, I was discarded." "Kezia, calm down." Omari tried to mediate, though his eyes looked greedily at the documents on the table. "I am calm," Kezia snapped. She looked at Omari. "Now give me the papers." Omari opened his briefcase, took out some papers and a pen, and slid them in front of Zaria. "What is this?" Zaria asked. "Power of attorney," Omari replied. His voice was flat now, without a trace of sweetness. "Sign here, Zaria, to transfer all these assets to a corporate account that Kezia manages." "No," said Zaria. Kezia laughed, a dry, horrible laugh. "I knew you would say that." She reached into her purse and pulled out something that froze Zaria's blood. Despite being warned by Mr. Sterling, there it was, a small silver handgun. "Kezia, what are you doing?" Omari shouted, genuinely surprised. He knew about the asset seizure plan, but not about the gun. "Shut up, Omari. Did you really think we could leave her alive after this? She knows too much," Kezia said. She pointed the gun directly at Zaria's forehead. "Sign, Zaria, or I'll put a hole in your head right here and forge your signature. I prefer the first option. It's cleaner." Zaria looked at the black hole at the muzzle of the gun. She looked at her sister's eyes full of hatred. She looked at her husband, too weak to defend her, shaking with fear. She took a deep breath. "That gun won't do you any good, sister," Zaria said calmly. Kezia frowned. "What are you talking about?" "And that safe is empty," Zaria continued. Just then, a loud alarm sounded throughout the building. It wasn't a fire alarm, but a top-level security alarm. The bright white lights in the room went out, replaced by flashing red emergency lights that made Kezia's face look demonic. Clang! The sound of extra steel bolts locking the door from the outside was heard. The door was now completely sealed. Omari jumped to his feet. "What is this? What's happening?" He pounded on the steel door, but his voice couldn't be heard outside. Kezia showed panic for the first time. She pointed the gun back at Zaria. "What did you do?" "I just brought you here to your cage," Zaria said, standing up slowly. "We're all trapped here." "You stupid!" Kezia screamed. "No," Zaria said. "Just you two." An intercom on the wall hissed and turned on. The voice that was heard was Mr. Sterling's. "Kezia, Omari, all your actions have been recorded from the moment you entered this room. Your threats and your attempted murder have been recorded clearly." Kezia's face went pale. She looked at the gun in her hand. "The police are outside the door," the voice of Mr. Sterling continued. "Put down the weapon, Kezia. It's all over." Omari collapsed to the floor, leaning against the door. "It's over! It's over!" he muttered hysterically. Kezia looked at Zaria with immeasurable hatred. She raised the gun. "If I go down, you go down with me." Kezia's scream echoed in the soundproof room. The red emergency lights flashed incessantly, bathing Kezia and Omari's faces in a macabre hue. Outside, Mr. Sterling's voice had ceased, leaving a heavy silence of anticipation. The gun in Kezia's hand shook violently, held by a hand consumed by pure rage. "You set a trap for me?" she hissed. Omari was still slumped near the door, mumbling incoherently. "We're trapped, the police. They caught us." Zaria stood tall. Strangely, the fear that had gripped her moments before had disappeared. What remained was a piercing coldness, profound disgust, and a strength she never knew she possessed. She looked her sister in the eyes. "You set the trap for yourself," Zaria said. She looked at the open safety deposit box on the table. "Did you really think Dad was that naive? He hated me. He gave everything to you, his golden child," Kezia shouted. "No," Zaria said. She took a slow step toward the table. Kezia immediately aimed the gun tighter at her chest. "Stop. Don't move." Zaria stopped. "You're wrong. Dad didn't hate you. He protected you." Those words made Kezia hesitate for an instant. Even Omari stopped mumbling. He looked at Zariah confused. "Protected me from what?" Zariah pointed to the pile of documents on the table. "You were so busy looking for the real will and asset certificates that you didn't see the real treasure. You didn't see what was hidden at the bottom of this very box." Mr. Sterling's advice echoed in her ears. "Your father kept it all, Zariah, not to punish, but as insurance." "Did you think this inheritance was just about money, sister?" Zariah continued, her voice steady. "No, this inheritance is about your crimes." With a quick movement, Zariah reached into the bottom of the box, under the bags of diamonds. She pulled out a thick brown envelope that Kezia hadn't touched. "What is that?" Omari asked, his voice trembling. Zariah opened the envelope and dumped its contents onto the table. They weren't deeds or money. The contents were copies of audit reports, bank transfer receipts, and fake invoices. "Remember 5 years ago?" Zariah said, staring at Kezia. "When Dad was hospitalized for 3 months because of his heart attack, he temporarily left financial control of the company in your hands and Mom's." Kezia's face went from red to ashen white. She knew what those papers were. "You two," Zariah said, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. "You and Mom almost drove the company into bankruptcy. You embezzled funds. Here is the proof. Receipts of transfers to shell accounts in Switzerland. Fake invoices from vendors that didn't even exist. You stole millions of dollars." Omari looked at the papers, horrified. Then he looked at Kezia. What is this? Kezia, this is a felony." "Dad knew," Zariah continued, ignoring Omari. "When he recovered, he found out everything. He could have sent you both to prison right then, but he didn't. He covered your tracks. He fired the old auditor and hired a new team, and he covered the company's losses with his own personal wealth. He did it in silence to protect the family name, to protect you, and to protect Mom." Zariah paused, letting the truth sink in. Dad was devastated, not by the money, but by your betrayal. That's why he made the real will. He knew your nature. He knew you were greedy. This real will wasn't made to punish you. It was made to protect me, to prevent you from taking control of the company and ruining it again after his death. Kezia shook violently. The gun in her hand wobbled. "Lies! It's a lie! It's all slander!" "Here is the proof," Zariah said, pointing to the papers on the table. "Dad kept all this evidence here in this box, under all the assets you coveted. This was the insurance. As long as you didn't cause trouble, this secret was safe. But Dad knew your greed wouldn't stop, and he was right." Omari looked at Kezia with eyes of pure terror. His entire narrative had collapsed. He wasn't helping a wronged heiress reclaim what was hers. He was helping a high-level criminal cover the tracks of her past crimes and commit new ones. He had betrayed his wife and risked his life for a woman like this. "So you used me," Omari whispered. "Your whole story about how unfair your father was? It was all a lie." Kezia didn't answer. Her eyes shone with madness. She was trapped. The police outside, the evidence of her crimes on the table, the real will in Mr. Sterling's hands. Everything had crumbled. Her entire life, her reputation, her lies, all shattered in minutes in this small red room. Her face hardened. Her hatred was no longer directed at her father, but at the one person who had revealed it all. "You!" she spat at Zariah. "You ruined me!" "You ruined yourself!" Zariah retorted. "Then," Kezia shouted, her voice breaking into hysteria, "I won't go down alone." She raised the gun, ignoring Omari, ignoring the intercom, ignoring the police outside. She lunged at Zariah, no longer to threaten, but to kill. Kezia's movement was incredibly fast, driven by sheer desperation. She threw herself toward Zariah, her free hand trying to grab the papers from the table, while the hand with the gun was ready to strike or shoot. Zariah backed up. Her back hit the cold steel wall. The room was too small to dodge her. "Die, Zariah!" Kezia screamed. Omari froze for a split second. His mind was chaos. He was done. He would go to jail, accomplice to a criminal. He had betrayed the only person who had truly loved him. Zariah saw the gun pointing at her chest. She saw Keziah's finger tightening on the trigger. In a split second, a decision was made. It wasn't a heroic decision. It was a complex mix of guilt, fear, and perhaps the last vestige of love for his wife. If he let Zariah die, he would be an accomplice to murder. If he did something, maybe there was still hope. Just as Keziah pulled the trigger, "No!" Omari shouted. Bang! The gunshot in the soundproof room was deafening. Zariah closed her eyes, waiting for a pain that never came. She opened her eyes slowly. Keziah was standing frozen, eyes wide with shock. Between the two of them, Omari was standing, swaying. He had jumped from his spot near the door, throwing himself in front of Zariah, using his own body as a shield. The sleeve of his white shirt at shoulder height was torn and stained dark red in an instant. Blood began to drip onto the cold ceramic floor. Omari looked at his own shoulder, and then at Keziah. His face was pale, no longer from fear, but from sharp pain. "You shot me," he muttered in disbelief. He looked back toward Zariah, who stared at him in shock. He tried to say something, but only a moan came out. His body collapsed to the floor, falling at Zariah's feet. The silence after the shot was absolute. Only Keziah's panting breath and Omari's groans of pain could be heard. The red emergency lights kept flashing, reflecting in the pool of blood beginning to spread across the floor. Click! The gunshot had activated the emergency unlock. The heavy steel door began to open with a soft, hydraulic hiss. Bright white light from the hallway flooded the room, blinding them. The first person to enter was Mr. Sterling, face tense. Just behind him, 2 uniformed police officers with bulletproof vests and drawn weapons burst in. "Freeze! Drop the weapon!" an officer shouted. They saw the scene in an instant. Zariah, upright against the wall, Omari, slumped at her feet clutching his bloody shoulder, and Keziah, standing in the center of the room holding the gun that was now smoking. All resistance seemed to leave Keziah. Her knees gave way. The silver gun slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a metallic clatter. She looked at her empty hands, then at Omari, and then at Zariah. She had completely lost. "Arrest her," Mr. Sterling said quietly to the officers. An officer moved forward immediately and handcuffed Keziah's hands behind her back. Keziah didn't resist. She simply stared ahead with a vacant look. The other officer knelt immediately beside Omari. "We need medical assistance. Gunshot wound." Zariah watched everything like a slow dream. The sister who had brought ruin to her life was now being led out of the room like a common criminal. Mr. Sterling approached Zariah. "Zariah, are you okay? Are you hurt?" Zariah shook her head silently. She looked down,